It's good early afternoon. It's great to be here. Not too long ago, I watched a documentary about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. called King in the Wilderness. It gave me a whole new perspective of the man for whom we have a national holiday. The documentary, which looks at the last 12 months of King's life, takes him down from the mountaintop and gives you a glimpse of the real glory of who he was. Not a walking monument, but a human being with fear, humor, guts, and amazing grace under pressure. But most of all, King wasn't afraid to speak out about what he believed, even if it meant being unpopular. The war in Vietnam was one such topic. On April 4th, 1967, King delivered his seminal speech at New York's Riverside Church condemning the war. His decision to come out publicly against the war and to attack his civil rights ally at the time, President Lyndon Johnson, over it, enraged most of the nation. His supporters in the Democratic Party, but also, strikingly, many of his brothers in the civil rights struggle, who felt he was diluting their message, but King could not keep quiet. He saw the corruption of the war as inextricable from the United States' systemic racism. He lost political points, but he expanded its breadth as a leader. In my nearly 30 years as a reporter and the time I've been in public relations, I've encountered some amazing individuals who weren't afraid to speak out to create change. One person that comes to mind is Hosack Sharp. I first met him when I was a 22-year-old intern, that was a while ago, for the Associated Press. He's someone I've never forgotten, partly because in a way, he jump-started my journalism career. Here's a little backdrop. It was July 1992, and the head of the Nashville AP Bureau where I worked assigned me to cover the NAACP's annual convention in Nashville. Ross Perot, the Texas billionaire and presidential candidate, had agreed to speak. It was an important moment for Perot, who had set off a grassroots explosion months earlier by promising to wage an independent presidential candidacy if volunteers put him on the ballot in all 50 states. The public, fed up with President George H.W. Bush and a sputtering economy, but turned off by the scandal-plagued Bill Clinton, had responded. Ballot drives were initiated and completed in record time by June. Polls showed Perot climbing into first place in a three-way race. But doubts about Perot began to emerge, and his poll numbers slid back. By early July, when he accepted the NAACP invitation, he had fallen back under 30% in the national polls, with Clinton rising from the dead and surpassing him for second place. It was against this backdrop that Perot arrived in Nashville for an unofficial showdown with Clinton, who, the day before, had tapped Al Gore as his running mate. The speech was an opportunity for Perot to regain his footing, to demonstrate that his message had broad appeal, and to reclaim some of the ground he'd been losing to Clinton. A month earlier, Clinton had angered some black leaders, and Jesse Jackson in particular, by using a speech to Jackson's Rainbow Coalition to rebuke rapper Sister Souljah for the inflammatory comments she made in the wake of the LA riots. In other words, it seemed entirely possible that Perot would outshine Clinton at the NAACP convention, except that's not at all how it happened. Rattling off a list of gloomy statistics on the unemployment from around the country, Perot offended many in the audience within the first 5 minutes of his speech. Said Perot, "I don't have to tell you who gets hurt the most when this sort of thing happens to them. You people do. Your people do." One young man, a 21-year-old student from Chicago State University, was among those offended by Perot's "you people" remark. And he didn't bite his tongue in letting the Texas billionaire know. "You people," shouted Hozak Sharp from the back of the crowded room. "I don't understand you," Perot said to Sharp, who repeated the phrase for him. "Thank you," Perot replied. "Correct it," Sharp shouted. Perot continued on. Minutes later, while talking about crime, Perot used the phrase again, and the scene with Sharp was repeated. "I can't believe he said it again," Sharp shouted. I was standing just a few feet away from Sharp, and I started making my way to where he was sitting. I wanted to be close to him when Perot finished his speech, because I knew other reporters in the room were going to converge on him. When Perot finished, I was right there to get comment from Sharp, who opened up like a faucet. He said that he wasn't being mean-spirited. He just didn't think that an audience of African Americans should be addressed as "you people." It was insensitive, and others felt the same way. After getting Sharp's comments, I immediately called my bureau and dictated to the broadcast editor what Sharp had told me. He put that out minutes later across the nation. Not long afterward, I began receiving phone calls from reporters across the country wanting more information about the incident. Needless to say, when it was Clinton's time to speak at the convention, he wooed the crowd, as you might imagine. There were no repeats of his Sister Soldier moment. Jackson quickly announced that he was backing Clinton. About a week later, Perot dropped out. The Texas billionaire had said that he was in touch with the people, but evidently he wasn't as in touch as he thought he was. My chief of bureau was impressed that I helped the AP get the Perot gaffe out to the world before anybody else. He offered me a permanent position before I even graduated. So in a way, I guess I have Horace Sharp to thank for the more than 20 years I spent at the Associated Press, because it was essentially his action that opened the door for me. But I'm most thankful for is witnessing someone who was at the same age of me at that time speak out about something he didn't like without the use of a weapon, without using vulgar language. His weapon was his voice, and he changed the course of history. Later in my journalism career, I met another young man who, despite believing he wouldn't live past 20, has, and is continuing to change the countless lives for the better. His name is Keith Strickland, and this is a little something about him in his own words. "I almost ruined my life before I had a clue what life was about or what I had the potential to be. I grew up in a community where I saw more homeless people and hustlers than dual-parent households and professional adults. After years of overwhelming influence, I started to think the illegal activity I saw daily was normal. My first arrest was shoplifting from a local store when I was still in middle school. Directly after that, I started selling drugs. I was about 13 years old when I first started high school. I could tell that my life was out of control and was leading me in a direction I did not want to go in. I did not know what to do or how to change, though. I looked for a mentor, but there were no organizations or people who offered the type of assistance I needed. I was arrested at my high school after being caught with a large amount of money and drugs. I would never attend high school again. I was now an independent adult who could barely read, but knew how to sell drugs and survive as a criminal. Every influence I had pulled me deeper in the direction I once tried to run away from. By the time I turned 25, I had been arrested over 50 times, watched people be murdered, was kidnapped then left for dead in a robbery, and served almost 5 years of my life behind bars. I was given an opportunity most people in my position never receive, a second chance. After facing 35 years in prison for another drug conviction, I was released early because the judge over my case saw something in me. I started a business, went to college, and earned my degree. I was able to finally get my life on track. Saving my own life was not enough for me. Today, at age 27, Keith is the founder and CEO of Making the Transition, a behavioral modification and life enrichment agency working with inner city youth and young adults. It specializes in cognitive awareness, life skills training, vision building, and helps participants create a healthier self-concept, while instilling evidence-based practices essential for overcoming various social determinants and life barriers. It aims to inspire youth to take control of their lives by creating hope, providing guidance, sharing knowledge, establishing accountability, building and maintaining support systems, and motivating positive growth. The program has impacted over 100,000 youth. Says Keith, hope is the most powerful instrument we can give a youth. Hope for tomorrow, hope in themselves, hope that they can achieve their dreams, create a life that will bring them fulfillment and make something of themselves. It is possible to provide a child with hope regardless of what they've endured. Working together, we can provide every youth with this and more, ensuring the opportunity for a bright future. You know, it's amazing how we want to do one thing or see our lives going in one direction, but God has a different path for us. I wanted to actually be a fighter pilot, fly F-16s. I actually received a congressional nomination to attend the U.S. Air Force Academy, but my vision didn't meet their standards, and I found myself at Middle Tennessee State University, where I eventually majored in journalism. But it was in that field that I met some extraordinary people of all ages, from all walks of life and diverse races. One person that I met late in my career with the Associated Press is a fellow by the name of Jim Emerson. Now, Jim is what you might call a true Southern gentleman. His thick accent leaves nothing to question. A retired 74-year-old attorney whose family includes 3 generations of judges, you'd think he'd just take it easy with his lovely wife, Betty, but not Jim. For more than 10 years now, he's been on a mission to solve the murder of NAACP leader Elbert Williams. On June 20th, 1940, more than 2 decades before NAACP leader Medgar Evers was gunned down by a Klansman outside his Jackson, Mississippi home, Williams was killed by unknown assailants in Brownsville, Tennessee, just northeast of Memphis. He was trying to register blacks to vote. Records show that Brownsville police, upset because the local NAACP branch was registering blacks, had led an effort to force its members out of town. Then U.S. Assistant Attorney General Wendell Burge said in a letter to U.S. District Attorney William Clanahan that the obvious purpose of the police and others had been to frighten the entire colored population of Brownsville and thus prevent qualified blacks from exercising their franchise. Some of the members left town, but Elbert Williams stayed behind. When the police got a tip that he was planning an NAACP meeting at his home, a group of men, led by a police officer, went to his residence, said they needed to question him outside, then took him away. Williams' body was found 3 days later in the nearby Hatchie River. No autopsy was performed. A coroner's jury ruled the body was decomposed so badly we could not make thorough examination, and that the cause of death believed to be by foul means by persons unknown. My AP story about Jim's plight to solve the murder ran 3 years ago and went viral. In January, Jim's effort resulted in Tennessee lawmakers' passage of the Civil Rights Crime Cold Case Law, first of its kind legislation that mandates a statewide survey of cold civil rights crimes and directs referral of viable cases for prosecution. In August of this year, 28th Judicial District Attorney Gary Brown announced that he's reopening the investigation into Williams' murder. That opened the door for Brown's investigators and forensic scientists to look for Williams' grave and exhume his body. I have to be honest, I wondered why this Southern white man, who could be doing something else or nothing at all, chose to do what he's doing. And his answer was simple: justice. Said Jim, the murder of Elbert Williams is a crime that screams for justice, which can only be achieved with the completion of an investigation which was abandoned long ago. Now, in writing Jim's story, before writing the story, as well as any story that I wrote for the Associated Press, I would always say this prayer that the story would be accurate, that it would be fair, that it would come together, and that it would reach people. And so I can honestly say that in the stories that I wrote, there was no fake news because the Holy Spirit was my editor. And I can also say that reporters that I know, that even if they don't pray, when they write their stories, they're pretty accurate, they're not malicious, and they make sure that they're fact-based and that they're fair. But nonetheless, on January 4th, 2016, I left the AP and took a job as Director of Media Relations at Tennessee State University in Nashville. Part of my reason for leaving was because of some of the news industry changes. There was a lot of downsizing occurring, even at the AP, which I thought was immune because it's a wire service. But there was a part of me that longed to be back in the collegiate setting, to interact with students and faculty and share the great things they're doing like you all are doing here. At one point, I took a sabbatical from the AP and did some adjunct teaching in journalism at my alma mater, MTSU. So when a state education official told me about the position at TSU and that I should apply, I did. I've been there almost 3 years now, and I continue to meet amazing individuals who strive to make a difference. One person is Lieutenant Colonel Sharon Presley. An Air Force veteran of more than 30 years, Presley commands TSU's Air Force ROTC Detachment 790, which was started by two of the original famed Tuskegee Airmen. She has helped numerous students get full Air Force scholarships that have allowed them to get higher education without the financial burden. But what stands out the most about Presley is her passion for history. In particular, the history at TSU, which is a historically black university. Presley's zeal has drawn some attention because she's white. Some question, why is she so passionate about our history? But what I found out is that it doesn't matter to her. She just wants students to know about the extraordinary people who have come before them and realize that they too are more than ordinary. Because of Presley, TSU found out last year about Lieutenant William McBriar, an alumnus of the university who was a Buffalo soldier that received a Medal of Honor, the nation's highest personal military decoration. Dating back to the Civil War, there have been 3,498 Medal of Honor recipients. Of that number, 90 are black, including McBriar. What is fascinating about McBriar is that at age 73, he returned to Tennessee State University and finished his degree, again, age 73. He then went on to write for a publication at the university called The Bulletin about social justice and what was going on at Germany at the time. It just goes to show that you're never too old to get an education. Presley also brought to our attention that the university has an alum who was a prisoner of war. Lieutenant Colonel James Williams was a fighter pilot who was shot down over North Vietnam in 1972 and taken captive. He was a POW in the infamous torture prison camp called the Hanoi Hilton with the late John McCain. They were both released in 1973. And talking about TSU, though, I can't leave out one alum whose act of bravery made worldwide news earlier this year. Perhaps you may have heard of him, James Shaw Jr., the Waffle House hero. On April 22nd, Shaw's life changed forever. He was in a Waffle House in a Nashville suburb when a gunman opened fire. Shaw wrestled the rifle away from the man and tossed it over the counter before shoving the shooter out the door. 4 people were killed and several others wounded in the shooting. But authorities have said there probably would have been more casualties had it not been for Shaw's actions. I don't know about you, but I'm not sure quite what I would have done in that situation. Indeed, Shaw is a hero, even though he humbly says that he isn't. But I believe what makes him even more special is what he did immediately after the shooting. Something we can all possibly learn from and maybe even emulate in some way. Shaw set up a GoFundMe for the shooting victims and their family members. His goal was $15,000, but in a matter of weeks, he raised more than $240,000. Shaw has also started a foundation that seeks to address mental health issues, as well as raise awareness and take action around public issues stemming from mass community violence. Not long after the shooting, Shaw got a surprise at the 2018 MTV Movie and TV Awards. He was in attendance with actor Chadwick Boseman, star of the blockbuster hit Black Panther, won the Best Superhero Golden Popcorn statue. But when he got on stage to accept the award, Boseman did something that shocked everyone. Said Boseman, "Receiving an award for playing a superhero is amazing, but it's even greater to acknowledge the heroes that we have in real life. So I just want to acknowledge someone that is here today, James Shaw Jr." Boseman then called Shaw on stage and gave him the award. The individuals that I've mentioned are ordinary, everyday people like you and me, but they've managed to do amazing things. When I looked up the definition of hero, it said, a person who is admired or idealized for courage, outstanding achievements, or notable qualities. The one part of that definition that jumped out at me is courage. And so, if I were to add to the definition, I would say that a hero is courageous enough to believe that he or she can be a change agent, that they can make a difference or impact society in a positive way. And I believe there's courage in each of us. But there's also something we each have and should probably exercise more to fortify that courage, and that's faith. I want to share one more story that's making national news and just happens to be tied to TSU. You may have heard about the football player at TSU, Christian Abercrombie, who sustained a brain injury in the September 29th game between TSU and Vanderbilt University. He collapsed on the sideline and was rushed to the hospital where he underwent emergency brain surgery. His chance for survival seemed slim. A ventilator kept him breathing. But Christian's mother, Stacy Abercrombie, never stopped believing that her son would get better. She said on the Today Show and expressed to other media that her faith was keeping her strong. In a press conference, she said with courage and faith, "We're expecting a miracle." I was in that press conference, and one of the main doctors, even though he couldn't really speak about faith or couldn't speak about God or higher power, he did say that her faith had inspired the other doctors. Last week, Christian was removed from the ventilator, began breathing on his own, and was transferred to a rehabilitation center in Atlanta. He's continuing to improve. Faith, courage, you all have that. And those two things alone ably equip you to be change agents. I'm sure each of you sees something going on around you, something in the nation, the world that you like to change. And you can make an impact. One way is on November 6th, when you have the opportunity to go to the polls and vote. Regardless of your political party, exercising your right to vote is one of the main ways you can enact change. But there's also something else I want to suggest you do. And it's very much needed in this day and time. Right now, our country is very divided, as divided as it's been in decades. One reason for the division seems to be this escalation of anger and frustration, mainly due to a lack of in-depth discussion on certain issues. We've stopped communicating, we've stopped talking. So if you know somebody that's upset about something, whether it be political or social, take time to hear them out. And then prayerfully, together, see if you can reach a solution or reach some common ground. That goes for myself as well. To quell the hatred, the discord, we all need to step out of our comfort zones and do something. Or if writing is something you do, then maybe you can blog about it, something you're passionate about. Writing is really just another way to get your voice out there. We want to hear from you. You're the future. One of my favorite political civil rights leaders is Congressman John Lewis. If you don't know him, you should definitely look him up. He was one of the original freedom riders and worked closely with Dr. King during the civil rights movement. Last year, Lewis made national news when at age 77, he participated in a sit-in at the Capitol in Washington to protest the health care bill the U.S. Senate was debating. And here you see him getting the Medal of Freedom, the highest civilian honor by former President Barack Obama. In the documentary that I mentioned earlier, King in the Wilderness, Lewis said this about change. When you see something that is not right, not just, we have a moral obligation and a mandate to do something, to say something, to speak up, to speak out. So go, be the change agents that you're capable of being. Be courageous, be heroes. Thank you.